Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and hit the subscribe if you haven't already. And if this is your first time here, welcome. You picked a wild one to start with. Let's get into it.
The office was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that only settled after dark. Most of the building had emptied long ago. Now, it was just the low hum of the HVAC and the occasional creak of the walls keeping me company. My door was slightly open, casting a sliver of light into the dark hallway. I glanced at the clock, 10:43 p.m. late, even for me. But deadlines didn't care about time, and as the head of strategic initiatives, everything came through my desk. I had worked hard for this position, climbing every step of the ladder with grit and determination. But success came with a price: long nights, missed dinners, and a personal life that had withered into little more than occasional wine and Netflix. Romance? Please. I barely had time to breathe, let alone navigate the emotional chaos of dating. Work was easier. It asked everything from me, and I gave it. Most days, I didn't mind. But tonight felt different. My body ached from hours hunched over reports. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. I leaned back in my chair, ran a hand through my hair, and told myself, just a few more hours. Then came a soft knock on the door. I jumped slightly, startled. When I turned, Ethan was there, leaning against the frame, hands in his pockets. The light from my desk cast soft shadows on his face, catching the stubble along his jaw. Ethan. One of my senior analysts. Sharp, loyal, and charming in a way that never felt forced. I'd noticed him before, of course, but I always made sure not to linger on those thoughts. I had rules. Boundaries. He stepped into the room, the soft sound of his shoes brushing the carpet breaking the stillness. His eyes locked on mine, as if he could see the exhaustion weighing me down. He placed a cup of coffee on my desk. The smell wrapped around me, warm, comforting. I reached for it without thinking, the heat grounding me. But it wasn't just the coffee that held my attention. His eyes stayed on me. There was something in his gaze, a quiet intensity that made it hard to breathe. I could feel his presence in the air between us, unsettling and electric. He moved closer, slowly, his fingers resting on the desk just inches from mine. My breath caught. Then came a soft knock on the door. I jumped slightly, startled. When I turned, Ethan was there, leaning against the frame, hands in his pockets. The light from my desk cast soft shadows on his face, catching the stubble along his jaw. Ethan. One of my senior analysts. Sharp, loyal, and charming in a way that never felt forced. I'd noticed him before, of course, but I always made sure not to linger on those thoughts. I had rules. Boundaries. He stepped into the room, the soft sound of his shoes brushing the carpet breaking the stillness. His eyes locked on mine, as if he could see the exhaustion weighing me down. He placed a cup of coffee on my desk. The smell wrapped around me, warm, comforting. I reached for it without thinking, the heat grounding me. But it wasn't just the coffee that held my attention. His eyes stayed on me. There was something in his gaze, a quiet intensity that made it hard to breathe. I could feel his presence in the air between us, unsettling and electric. He moved closer, slowly, his fingers resting on the desk just inches from mine. My breath caught. The next morning came too soon. I hadn't slept much. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything that happened. Every look, every touch, every kiss. The warmth of his skin still lingered on mine, like a soft echo I couldn't shake. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the same blouse from last night. The fabric smelled faintly of coffee and him. My fingers brushed my lips as if I could still feel his kiss. I closed my eyes and sighed. Was it a mistake? That question hung heavy in my chest. It wasn't just a kiss, or even what happened after. It was the way he looked at me, like I was more than my job, more than a title or a role. Like I was a woman who mattered. And that scared me more than anything. Because I had built my life carefully, like a wall of bricks, each one laid with hard work, focus, and sacrifice. There was no space for something messy like feelings. But last night cracked that wall. I took a long shower, trying to wash off the tension, the doubt, the weight of emotions I hadn't planned to carry. The water was hot, but it did little to soothe the ache inside me. I wrapped myself in a towel, stood in front of the mirror, and stared. Who was I now? The same woman. And yet, different. Back at the office, everything looked normal, but it didn't feel that way. People moved through the halls, chatting and typing, phones ringing. But for me, the air felt heavier. My eyes drifted to Ethan's desk. He wasn't there yet. My heart beat a little faster. Would he say something? Would I? Should we even talk about it? I turned away quickly and walked to my office, closing the door behind me. I sank into my chair and opened my laptop, pretending to care about the emails piling up. But my mind was somewhere else. Then came a soft knock. That same gentle sound as the night before. My breath caught. "Come in," I said, my voice a little too quiet. The door opened, and there he was. Ethan. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. His eyes found mine immediately. He didn't smile, but his expression was soft, curious, a little nervous. That surprised me. He always looked so confident. But now, he looked human. Like me. "Hi," he said gently. "Hi," I replied, barely above a whisper. We stood in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward, just full. Full of unspoken questions, feelings, fears. "About last night," he began. I looked down, unsure of what to say. "You don't have to say anything," he added quickly. I wanted you to know it wasn't nothing. Not to me." I looked up. His eyes were steady, sincere. There was no game, no pressure. Just honesty. And somehow, that was more terrifying than anything else. I swallowed. It wasn't nothing to me either. He stepped closer, but not too close. He was giving me space to choose. I appreciated that. "I don't want to make things harder for you," he said. "I know your work means everything. I know how much you've given to be where you are. I respect that. I care about you. And if all we ever have is that one night, I'll still be grateful I got to see that part of you." My throat tightened. No one had said something like that to me in years. I didn't know what to say. So I stood up and walked to the window. The city outside looked the same, busy and loud, but I felt completely still inside. "I don't know how to do this," I said honestly. "I don't know how to let someone in. I've spent so long building my life around work, around safety. And last night, it shook something in me." He came up beside me but didn't touch me. He just stood there, patient and quiet. "I'm not asking for everything," he said. "Not now. Maybe not ever. But if you ever want something more than late nights and coffee, I'll be here." I turned to him then. Really looked at him. This man had seen me at my most tired, most guarded, and still wanted to know me. Not for what I could do, but for who I was underneath it all. That scared me. But it also gave me hope. "I don't have answers," I said softly. "But I don't want to pretend last night didn't happen." He smiled then. A small, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Neither do I." We stood in silence again. This time, it felt lighter. Eventually, he stepped back. "I'll let you get back to work." I nodded. "Thank you, Ethan." He paused at the door, looked back once more, and then he was gone. I sat down at my desk and stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. My world hadn't changed, not completely. The deadlines were still there. The work was still waiting. But something inside me had shifted. And maybe that was enough, for now. Because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. The days that followed were quiet, but something had changed. Work continued as usual. Meetings, reports, deadlines. I walked the halls, gave instructions, answered emails. From the outside, everything looked the same. But inside me, it felt different, like I was carrying something delicate and new. Every time I passed Ethan in the hallway, there was a flicker of something between us. A glance that lasted a little too long. A smile that wasn't just polite. We didn't talk about that night again, not yet, but it lived between us like a secret only we shared. I thought I would feel uncomfortable. I thought it would be awkward or messy. But instead, I felt calm. Seen. And maybe a little afraid of what I was starting to feel. One evening, after another long day, I sat alone in my office again. The glow of my screen lit up the room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't focus. I was tired, not just physically, but in my heart. For years, I had poured myself into this job. I had given everything, my time, my energy, even parts of myself I hadn't meant to lose. And now, for the first time in a long while, I wondered what I had missed along the way. My phone buzzed. A message. No one had said something like that to me in years. I didn't know what to say. So I stood up and walked to the window. The city outside looked the same, busy and loud, but I felt completely still inside. I don't know how to do this, I said honestly. I don't know how to let someone in. I've spent so long building my life around work, around safety. And last night, it shook something in me. He came up beside me but didn't touch me. He just stood there, patient and quiet. I'm not asking for everything, he said. Not now. Maybe not ever. But if you ever want something more than late nights and coffee, I'll be here. I turned to him then. Really looked at him. This man had seen me at my most tired, most guarded, and still wanted to know me. Not for what I could do, but for who I was underneath it all. That scared me. But it also gave me hope. I don't have answers, I said softly. But I don't want to pretend last night didn't happen. He smiled then. A small, warm smile that reached his eyes. Neither do I. We stood in silence again. This time, it felt lighter. Eventually, he stepped back. I'll let you get back to work. I nodded. Thank you, Ethan. He paused at the door, looked back once more, and then he was gone. I sat down at my desk and stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. My world hadn't changed, not completely. The deadlines were still there. The work was still waiting. But something inside me had shifted. And maybe that was enough, for now. Because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. The days became softer after that. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer just moving through each day, I was living it. Slowly, I was learning to forgive myself. I had made mistakes. I had gone searching for something outside of my marriage. But it wasn't because I didn't love Chris. It was because I had forgotten how to love myself. Some mornings, I still woke up feeling unsure. Some nights, I still lay in bed wondering if we could truly make it. But the difference now was that I didn't run from those feelings. I let them sit beside me. I listened to them. And I let them go. Chris tried too. He listened more. He asked me how I felt. He laughed at my old jokes again. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes we had nothing to say. Sometimes the weight of the past came back like a shadow. But we didn't turn away anymore. We faced it together. One evening, as we walked by the lake near our home, I stopped and looked at the water. It was calm. Peaceful. Do you think we'll ever be the way we were before? I asked quietly. Chris took my hand and squeezed it gently. No, he said. But maybe we'll be something even better. I felt tears sting my eyes. Not from pain, but from the hope in his words. I knew we couldn't go back to who we were. Too much had changed. But maybe we didn't need to go back. Maybe we just needed to move forward, with truth, with care, with honesty. I began writing again. Not just in my journal, but small poems and letters to myself. I wrote about the girl I used to be. The woman I had become. And the one I was still growing into. I started to see her more clearly now, not broken, not selfish, just human. A woman who wanted to be seen, heard, and loved for all of who she was. And Jack? I thought of him less and less. He wasn't a regret. He was a reminder. A quiet chapter in a bigger story. One that pushed me to open my eyes, to wake up, and to find the parts of myself I had forgotten. Now, every time Chris holds my hand or brushes my hair behind my ear, I don't just feel love, I feel gratitude. We had walked through fire. And somehow, we were still standing. Not perfect. But real. And maybe that's what love truly is. I began noticing the little things again. The way Chris poured my coffee without asking. The quiet hum of the dishwasher late at night. The way our daughter laughed when she ran through the hallway. For a long time, those moments had felt like noise, background sounds in a life I thought had gone numb. But now, they were pieces of something I had almost forgotten, comfort. Not the loud kind that demands your attention, but the soft kind that holds you quietly, like a blanket you didn't know you needed. There were still difficult days. Days when I felt heavy with guilt. Days when I looked in the mirror and wondered who I really was. But instead of running, I sat with those feelings. I stopped pushing them away. I let them hurt. I let them speak. And little by little, they softened. They didn't disappear, but they stopped feeling like enemies. I talked to Chris more openly than I ever had before. Not just about the surface things like groceries or work or school pickup times. But about the parts of me I had buried, the fear of fading away, the longing for passion, the ache of being unseen. And he listened. Sometimes he didn't know what to say. But he stayed. He sat in the quiet with me. And somehow, that meant more than words ever could. One night, we sat on the couch after putting our daughter to bed. The house was still, peaceful. He turned to me and said, "I missed you. Even when you were right here, I missed you." My eyes filled with tears. "I missed me too," I whispered. He reached for my hand and held it gently. "I want to find you again. With you." And in that moment, something broke open in me, something old, something tender, something hopeful. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't trying to be perfect. We were just trying to be honest. To be kind. To be present. I had once gone looking for fire in someone else's arms, thinking I had lost it forever. But now I was learning that fire can be quiet too. It can be steady, patient, and warm. It can flicker in shared laughter, in forgiven silences, in gentle touches that say, "I still choose you." Chris and I began taking walks together again. Just us, no phones, no distractions. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. But each step felt like a small promise. Not that everything would be easy. But that we were still willing to try. Willing to love. Willing to grow. There was no clear ending to the pain. No moment where everything was suddenly okay. But there was movement. There was healing. And there was love, softer, deeper, more honest than before. It wasn't the kind of love I used to dream about. But it was real. And in the quiet of our shared life, I realized that maybe real love was what I needed all along. Some mornings, I woke up before the sun. The world was quiet. I would lie there, listening to Chris breathe beside me, and wonder how we got back here, together, still trying. It hadn't been easy. But love, I was learning, wasn't always loud or perfect. Sometimes love was showing up. Even when you were tired. Even when it hurt. Even when you were scared. There were days I still felt distant from myself. Like the old me, the wild, free, fire-hearted woman had packed her bags and left without warning. But then, in the middle of making lunch or folding laundry, she would return for a second. In a sudden laugh. In a flash of music. In a tiny choice to dance in the kitchen while waiting for the toast. And that tiny flicker of her gave me hope. Chris started leaving notes for me. Nothing dramatic, just little things. Thinking of you. Hope today feels lighter. Miss your smile. I kept them in a drawer by the bed. Some days, I read them when I felt like I was slipping. They reminded me that love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about noticing. It was about caring in the small moments. One night, I told Chris everything. About the bar. About Jack. About how I had felt invisible, and how someone else made me feel seen. His face went quiet, and for a long time, he didn't speak. But then he said, "Thank you for telling me. I'd rather know the truth than keep pretending we were fine." And I cried. Not because he was angry, but because he still chose to stay. That night, we held each other like we hadn't in years. It wasn't passion like the movies. It was deeper. Two people who had broken, and were trying to put the pieces back, together. We were quiet. But in that quiet, there was love. So much love. Slowly, we started finding each other again. We cooked together. We laughed again. We remembered how we used to be before everything got too heavy. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And honesty, I learned, could heal more than time. I stopped punishing myself. I stopped carrying shame like a weight on my back. I made peace with the fact that I had been lost. And I forgave myself for looking for light in someone else's arms. Sometimes people break, not because they want to, but because they don't know how to ask for help. And I had broken quietly, silently. But now I was learning how to ask, how to speak, how to hope again. Chris didn't ask me to be who I was before. He simply asked me to be here, now. And that gave me space to heal. To breathe. To fall back in love, not just with him, but with my own life. We're still growing. Still learning. But now, when I reach for his hand, he's there. And when he looks at me, he sees me. Not as the woman who almost left, or the woman who got lost, but as the woman who stayed, and fought, and came back home to herself. And that, I think, is the truest kind of love. Some days were still quiet between us. Not empty, just quiet. But silence had a new meaning now. It wasn't distance anymore. It was peace. We were learning how to be gentle with each other again. How to speak without blame. How to listen without needing to fix everything. Some nights, we just sat on the couch with tea, legs touching, saying nothing. And yet, I felt more connected to him in those quiet moments than I had in years. Sometimes, guilt tried to return. It whispered in my ear when I was alone. Telling me I didn't deserve this second chance. That I had broken something too deeply to be repaired. But then Chris would do something so simple, bring me a blanket, hold my hand when I was tired, kiss my forehead, and that voice would soften. Because I wasn't the only one trying. He was trying too. One evening, we looked through an old photo album together. Our wedding day. Our first road trip. The day our daughter was born. I saw the joy in our faces back then, and for a moment, I felt a sharp ache in my chest. Had we lost all of that? But then Chris looked at me and said, "We're not those people anymore." But maybe that's okay. Maybe who we are now is even stronger. And I believed him. I started writing again. Not for anyone else, just for me. My thoughts. My feelings. The things I was too afraid to say out loud. It became a kind of healing. A way to understand myself. To forgive myself. Chris began sharing more too. Things he had hidden for years. The fear of not being enough. The weight of responsibility, The way he missed me, not just the woman he lived with, but the woman who used to light up every room. We both cried that night. It was the first time in a long time we saw each other, truly saw each other. We started taking small trips again. A weekend by the lake. A drive through the mountains. Nothing big, but it reminded us how to explore together. How to laugh without pressure. How to just be. I stopped chasing the old version of myself. She was part of me, yes. But I had changed. Life had shaped me, and I was learning to accept this new version, softer, wiser, still full of dreams. Chris told me once, "I love who you're becoming." And I smiled through tears, because I was learning to love her too. We still had work to do. Love, I realized, isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you build every day. With kindness. With effort. With forgiveness. And now, when I walk through our home, it feels warm again. Not because everything is perfect. But because we are choosing each other again and again. And sometimes, that's the most powerful kind of love there is.
Some mornings, I still wake up before the sun. I lie there in the quiet, listening to Chris's steady breathing beside me. The old silence that once felt cold and heavy is now soft. It wraps around me like a blanket. It's not loneliness anymore. It's calm. I used to be afraid of these quiet moments. They gave me too much time to think. Too much space for regret. But now, I let the thoughts come. I don't run from them anymore. Sometimes, I think about that night. The man at the bar. His touch, his eyes, the fire he lit inside me. I won't pretend it didn't happen. I won't pretend it didn't change me. But it's no longer something that haunts me. It's something that woke me up. Something that reminded me I was alive and that I needed more. But what I didn't know then was this: sometimes the more we're searching for isn't found in someone new. It's found in the courage to speak our truth. To be honest with the one we love. To open the door and say, "I'm not okay, but I want to be with you." Chris never asked me to forget what I did. He never tried to erase it. Instead, he made space for my pain. He made space for my shame. And slowly, I made space for his. We learned that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the smallest things: his hand reaching for mine, his eyes soft with understanding, his quiet presence when the world feels too loud. We started going on walks together in the evening. Nothing fancy. Just steps shared between two people trying to find their way back. We talked about our day. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. But with every walk, every shared sunset, we rebuilt a little piece of us. One evening, as we sat on a park bench, Chris turned to me and said, "I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to reach you." I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood. I had been waiting for him to come closer, while he had been waiting for me to let him in. I don't know what the future will bring. I don't pretend to have all the answers. But I know this: I want to keep choosing him. And I want to keep choosing myself, too. For the first time in a long time, I'm not pretending. I'm not hiding. I'm just here with all my mess and all my hope. And that's more than enough. It's been months now. Life has returned to its quiet rhythm, but something inside me is different. Not broken. Just changed. I no longer see the world the same way. I see details I once missed: the way Chris hums while brushing his teeth, the way the coffee smells in the morning, the way my son laughs like he's never been hurt. These little things, they matter now more than ever. There are days when guilt still visits me, like a ghost from another life. I don't fight it. I let it sit with me. I let it remind me of the woman I was, and the woman I'm still becoming. But I no longer let guilt take the wheel. I'm driving now. Chris and I talk more these days. Real conversations. Not just about bills or groceries, but about us. About who we are. About what we want. We still stumble sometimes, but we catch each other. There's love in the way we're trying. There's hope in the way we stay. One night, I told him everything. Not just about what I did, but about what I felt. About the loneliness. The hunger to be seen. If you really enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button for part 2 and now answer me if you were in that office. Could you keep up with me on your own, or would you have needed backup? To tell me in the comments, I will be reading. And if you haven't hit share subscribe, can tap the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Thanks for being here and making this channel possible.